Smart Life. It is good to be with you. Just a reminder, you can watch us live in cities around the country on Biz TV, growing all the time. Now on the air in New York, Philadelphia, Orlando, and Los Angeles. Biz TV, it's your biz. And of course, you can view past episodes of Smart Life at moneybizlife.com. Well, if you happen to read the New York Times these days, and I bet you probably don't, but you may have noticed some articles critical of Obama's golfing habit. Maureen Dowd absolutely lambasted him recently, and she has been one of his biggest supporters in the past. That is up until now. Tea Partiers have been calling out the president for his excessive golfing for years, but it seems like Democrats are joining in the chorus now. And here to talk a little golf with me is Scottie Hughes. Good to have you with us today, Scottie.
Thanks for having me, Jeannie. And to be honest with you, we can talk about shoes. We can even talk about how to find the cure for cancer. We can talk about how to solve this economy. But golf, Gina, this is probably not the best subject for you and I to discuss, but we can talk about the man who's played a lot of it the past couple years.
Certainly has. What's it like, Scottie, for you to have Maureen Dowd on your side for probably one of the first and only times ever?
You know, it's amazing. This administration has done wonders to create the most strangest bedfellows. When you sit there and you have conservatives sitting there with somebody as progressive as Maureen Dowd, you know that probably the president's really screwing up to get both of us to lie in the same bed.
Yeah, I would think that is right. She started the article like this. She calls it the golf address. And this is pretty funny, actually. I wish I'd thought of it. 4, she says, score, she says, and 7 trillion rounds ago, our 4 caddies brought forth on this continent a new playground conceived by Robert Trent Jones and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal when it comes to spending as much time at the links as possible. Pretty creative, but really not a funny thing, because we really are talking about the death of this journalist, the death of all these Christians, which he's barely mentioned. There are all sorts of things happening around the world, and it seems this president doesn't ever stop golfing or vacationing. They thought we were crazy when we called him the most golfing, the most vacationing president ever, but we weren't crazy, were we, Scottie?
We were not crazy, and I have to be honest with you, I think one of probably the cabinet meetings or one of his administration meetings probably reflect a lot like Caddyshack. In fact, I imagine there's probably a gopher that even pops in or out of maybe some of these staff meetings. But, you know, the sad part of all this, you're right, Gina, people's lives have been lost. Whether you want to talk about our ambassador in Benghazi, whether you want to talk about things that happened in the Fast and Furious scandal, and now we had a journalist, his head was cut off on national television to sit there and send the message to Americans to be scared, because they're coming after us next. And on one hand, maybe 20, 30 years ago, I would have been happy for a progressive president like this to be golfing. But unfortunately, thanks to technology, he still has that pen in his phone in his hand and can do as much damage on the golf course as he could do in the Oval Office.
Yeah, well, and we're going to get to the damage he's getting ready to do here really soon. But you mentioned that ISIS has already threatened there are going to be attacks in the United States. I think they named New York City, and you and I are both headed there, I believe, this week, if I'm not mistaken. But they also have another hostage now. Stephen Sotloff is the new center of the ISIS propaganda campaign. They've started tweeting about him, hashtagging about that he is going to be next. He will be beheaded by ISIS, they say, unless they get whatever it is they want from Obama. And yet Obama continues with the partying, the vacationing, and the golfing. What do you make of this, Scottie?
Well, to be honest with you, here's the thing that I get, and this is, you know, shame on President Obama and his staff, but I also want to say shame on Americans. And this is going to get a little bit more faith-based, but guess what? We're dealing about an issue of religion, and it's my religion. It's Christianity. And so shame on all of you Christians back there in 2012 when those of us of faith that are involved in politics were saying, wake up, you're going to have to go to the voting box. This man is dangerous. Not only is he dangerous here at home, but he's dangerous abroad. It is because of his irresponsible leadership as commander-in-chief that we pulled out of Iraq as a campaign promise to his progressive buddies that has led to this today. And guess who were slaughtered? The men and women, our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. And it's going to continue. And don't get me wrong, they don't want to wish us, you know, any sort of goodness. They want to hurt us, and they want to do it publicly. And that's a very scary, serious terrorist threat that we need to be dealing with, not necessarily about what swing and what his handicap is on the golf course.
MSNBC senior White House correspondent Chris Jansing said that senior White House officials expect Obama to grant executive amnesty to around 5 million illegal immigrants after his European trip to Estonia and Wales. We know that many, I've had people sitting right here on my show who are witness to terrorists coming across our borders in droves, Scottie. Now these folks are going to have amnesty so they can go ahead and grow their terrorist cells and all the rest of it. What do you have to say about this?
Yet Harry Reid calls us domestic terrorists, and that we conservatives need to be, they need to be warned of us. Thank you so much, Dr. Gina, for talking about immigration. It's such an important issue right now that amongst all of the other chaos that's been going on in the news, guys, it's gotten, very little coverage. It's fallen through the cracks, exactly what the president wants, because he realized that the majority of Americans right now are waking up and are very scared about how open and porous our borders are. Giving them amnesty might give them Democrat voters, but at what cost? How much danger is he actually not only allowing across our border, but with this new amnesty plan, he's going to be encouraging. So this is very dangerous, very scary times that we're living in here as United States citizens.
A Michigan teacher has compared Ferguson to the Boston Tea Party. Now, this to you as a news director for TPNN ought to have a lot of impact. He put a picture of the Ferguson looting and riots up next to a picture of the Boston Tea Party, and he asked some questions about that. He said, what are the similarities between the events? Why did the people in Boston dress up as Native Americans? What stereotypes does it show? And he asked this too. The event on the right, being the one of the Boston Tea Partiers, has been mythologized and treated as an action by heroes. He asked, do you think the event of the Ferguson riots will be treated as such? My question for you, Scottie, with all of your involvement in the Tea Party is, isn't there a subtle difference between protests and criminal looting?
I think there's a big difference, and that's the difference between all, which makes his article absolutely ludicrous, and it just shows what kind of propaganda this is from the liberal progressives in the journalism world today. But the truth be told, here's one thing that we do have in common. It's called the First Amendment and the freedom of speech. Just like he has the right to sit there and print that, we have the right on tpnn.com, on drgina.com, to print what we wish, and that's something that we need to be united to protect. And that's something, if he actually wants to do an accurate, take the propaganda out of his article, he needs to be grateful for, because if there's anything this administration has done, he's tried to crack down. And so you have to look at it. The freedom of speech can go either way, and regardless of whether you agree or disagree with what they're saying, respect it and protect it. And that's what I have to sit there and say to that. That was ludicrous for him. It's absolute propaganda, but I am glad that I live in a country that he can write that, which unfortunately this president would love to see those sorts of freedoms taken away from people who might criticize him.
Well, it's not just the fact that he wrote it, but it's that he's teaching it to our school children that are paid to be there by the taxpayers. And I guess I have a big problem with teaching that sort of thing, because I don't think that a political protest is the same thing as as rioting and unlawful looting. Stealing a 12-pack of beer is just not the same thing as what happened at the Boston Tea Party for people who know their history. And I think that this whole idea of institutionalized racism, and they're saying, this is a protest against white privilege that is institutionalized and is so deep-seated in our country and in our institutions that we can't possibly even know how racist we all really are. And that's what they're teaching. And so I guess my question for you is, do you see this institutionalized racism that supposedly these protesters, now really in other parts of the country too, are looting and rioting over?
Listen, if the people of Ferguson or any of these people like Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson can't see that they're being used as literally political propaganda, then I feel very sorry for them. If they're going to use that excuse, if they think that, they're going to get away with a free pair of Nikes or Air Jordans, or maybe get a DVD player, or as we saw in the case of the whiskey store being broken into, if that's what they're going to get out of it, good, because the price you're paying is very, very high. Every time you see racism interjected in a conversation in this country today, realize that it's meant to take away from the real heart of the situation and what the truth is in that situation. It's meant to sit there and stir up emotions so that you don't actually use your mind to realize what the facts and truths are. And we've seen that in Ferguson, and we're going to continue to see that every time this president or the progressives realize that the truth is about to get out and get to exposing the American people are going to find out what's exactly going on within this administration and what their cronies really want us to be dealing with.
Only a few seconds remaining, Scottie, but I want to ask you this. I heard about the protesters actually not being happy that Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton showed up on the scene to sort of capitalize on the situation. Do you think there's a shift in what is happening with these protests and within that sort of whole capitalizing on a crisis movement, if you will?
You would think so, and I would hope there would be, but unfortunately, we saw Al Sharpton today at the funeral. It takes the community has to take care of, make the decisions for their own selves, just like we have to make the decisions for our own selves. And so, yes, I see a little bit of a shift. This was all a shift, I believe, to sit there and detract from the immigration debate as well as what was going on across the country. So, the key is we Americans have to open up our eyes and don't trust the media unless you're watching the Dr. Gina show. This is one show you can trust.
Scottie Hughes, thank you so much for being with us. She's the director of the Tea Party News Network. You can find her on Twitter at Scottie Hughes, TPNN.com.